So hi, my name is Pete Hodgson. I'm a software delivery consultant, which means I help teams get better at building and releasing software. I also serve on the governance board for OpenFeature. OpenFeature is a CNCF project that defines an open standard for feature flagging. You can think of OpenFeature as Open Telemetry, but for feature flagging. I've been on the OpenFeature governance board since 2022, and I've worked as a consultant for a lot longer than that, kind of talking to organizations about feature flags and continuous delivery. And I've noticed this theme. When people talk about feature flags on the internet, there's usually some amount of hate and haters in the comments. When people talk about anything on the internet, there's some amount of haters in the comments. When it comes to feature flags, those criticisms tend to break down into two kind of very common themes. So theme number one, it's just an if-else statement. I don't even know why we have a name for this. It's a super basic programming practice I've been doing since the dawn of time. Why do you need a framework for this? Why would you pay for a service that does this? It's just a database table and 20 lines of code. Hands up if you've seen this criticism about feature flags in the past. Hands up if you've made this criticism about feature flags in the past. OK, second criticism. We use feature flags at my company. We have way too many. They suck. They're awful. There's if-else statements all over our code. They make a huge mess. No one knows what half these flags do. Some of them don't work, and we need to remove them. Some of them, I think, if we change them, would break a bunch of stuff. Testing is really hard. Hands up if you've seen this critique of feature flags. Hands up if you've made this critique about feature flags. OK. So I want to kind of argue a little bit about these criticisms, but I want to start by saying I think the people making these points are kind of making them in good faith based on their experience with feature flagging. But that doesn't mean that these are kind of universal truths for everyone's experience with feature flagging. And one of the points I want to make in this talk is that I think actually not taking feature flags seriously and saying, oh, it's just an if-else statement, actually leads to this second issue of not being able to manage them very well. So, rather than saying feature flags suck, what I want to talk about is how feature flags kind of can suck if you don't manage them well, and then flip that and say, how do we manage our feature flags better so that they suck less? So let's start with that first critique. It's just an if-else statement. Seeing these conversations over and over again, I've kind of come to the conclusion that the root cause for this is that there's a surprisingly divergent perspective on what feature flags even are. So for some people, when they say feature flags, they're thinking of A/B testing and experimentation. For other people, when they think of feature flags, they're thinking of release management, kind of separating deployment from release, getting rid of long-lived feature branches, continuous delivery, that kind of stuff. There's these two groups of people that literally are not aware that the other groups of people exist. And that's part of the problem here. A lot of the people also that kind of start using feature flags for kind of basic release management eventually move into kind of a more sophisticated use of feature flags. So you might start using feature flags to kind of perform a canary release, or maybe do some testing in production by turning on a feature just for your internal users, or turning on a feature just for like a beta set of users. And so even, and I think that's what the root for that kind of it's just an if-else statement is people who have only started using feature flags for those kind of very simplistic or kind of like entry-level release management cases and don't see there's this whole other world under the surface. So let's say you start using feature flags for that basic release management use case. And then you want to start maybe, say, testing in production and turning on a feature flag for an internal user. But if you want to do that, then you're going to need to have some kind of evaluation context. You need to know which user you're evaluating the flag for, what organization they belong to. You're then going to need to make kind of dynamic flagging decisions based on that evaluation context. If they're in this organization, show the flag. If they're not, don't show the flag. You're going to need some kind of rules engine to make those evaluation decisions. You're going to need to configure those rules using some kind of administrative UI, because now your product managers may be involved. Maybe you need some permissioning here because you don't want your product manager accidentally turning on a feature flag in production. Perhaps you want an audit trail so you can find out who turned on that feature flag in production. So there's this there's this iceberg of functionality that people don't see when they first get started. And I think that's why a lot of organizations get into this problem where when they start with feature flags, it's just a database table and 20 lines of code. They start building their own platform. They start using feature flags more for more advanced use cases. And 6 months later, a year later, they're asking themselves, why the heck are we still managing this thing? This is crazy. And I'll come back later in the talk to what to do when you come to this epiphany that maybe we shouldn't have built this thing in the first place. The fundamental problem here is as you use feature flags more, you kind of get yourself into a sticky situation. Which brings us to our second criticism. We have feature flags everywhere. They suck. This is a very common theme that I hear. A lot of organizations experience this situation. Even the fancy folks in Silicon Valley. This is a paper from Uber a while ago talking about how they were trying to pay down feature flag debt in their mobile code bases. And they kind of say offhand in the introduction that, oh yeah, we have like around 8,000 feature flags in our mobile app, and oh, by the way, over 1,000 of them turned out they were actually like not doing anything at all. So this is not just a problem for everyday companies, this is a problem for many organizations. I picked a random web app and poked around in their client-side code. They have a lot of feature flags. I'm not sure all of these are necessary. I don't think that GitHub necessarily need to still be managing all these feature flags for my user. So there's this super common theme of feature flag debt, too many flags. What can we do differently to address this problem, manage our flags better? So we have too many flags. I think this comes down to, if we break this problem down, it comes down to two main issues. We've added too many flags, and we haven't removed enough. That's it, easy, talk over. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Why aren't we removing these flags? This is the biggest problem that organizations have. Why is it a problem? There's two pieces to this. It's hard to figure out which flags we should be removing, and it's hard to find the time to remove those flags. So I want to talk about some tips for how to get better at these two practices. So first of all, identifying stale flags. So what's a stale flag? A stale flag is, so if you think about like a feature flag kind of generally goes through this kind of natural life cycle where the feature is under development, it's turned off for everyone, and then you turn it on for maybe internal users, maybe you turn it on for 50% of your users, eventually you turn it on for everyone, and at that point, maybe you wait a couple of weeks, and then at that point, you turn the flag, you remove the code in your code base, and you remove the configuration from your feature flagging platform. Except sometimes you don't, and that's when you get these stale flags. They should have been removed, they haven't been removed. And the thing is, it's quite hard when you've got operating at scale and you've got hundreds, thousands of flags to figure out which of your flags are in this state. And the key to addressing that is around metadata, or one of the keys is around metadata. So a thing you can do every time you create a flag is say when you expect it to expire. So I'm starting an A/B test, I'm creating a feature flag for it, I expect this test to run for about 2 weeks, so I put an expiration date for end of December. Now I can go through my feature flagging platform and say which flags have expired. Those are candidates for deletion. Likewise, I can keep track of where my flag is in the life cycle. So like I said, as you're kind of like rolling out a feature flag, you're going into the configuration platform, your feature flagging platform, and you're kind of updating it so it's available for internal users, and then you're updating the configuration again to roll it out to 50% of your users, and then you're updating the configuration again to say it's fully released. As you're making those changes in your feature flagging platform, you can also be updating some metadata to say what stage that flag is in. And what that lets you do is ask questions of your feature flagging platform like, which feature flags have been in experimentation for a year? Those are probably some flags that you want to look at. Which feature flags have been fully released for 3 months? Those are some feature flags you probably want to look at. And then finally, this one, I don't know why more people don't do this. It's super simple. Just keep track of which team owns which flag. If you've got a large number of teams in your company and you're all using the same feature flagging platform, you've got thousands of flags, and it kind of becomes this kind of tragedy of the commons where no one really knows where to start. If you can slice and dice your feature flags by team owner or by code base, then it helps you get your hands around the problem, and it also helps you figure out who should be responsible for doing that removal. Another thing you can do is you can use your feature flagging platform to kind of analyze usage of flags. So let's say I've removed a feature flag from my code base, but I haven't gotten around to actually removing it from my feature flagging platform. It's kind of a zombie flag that's never being checked. I can ask my feature flagging platform which flags are configured in the system but have not been evaluated at all for the last 6 months. That's probably a flag I should be removing. So it's interesting to note here that all of these tricks and tips to manage your feature flags require capabilities in your feature flagging platform. If you don't have these capabilities, you're not going to be able to manage your flags well. And that's why this iceberg thing is a real issue. If you're not taking feature flags seriously and you haven't invested in your internal platform, or maybe you just have never got around to really thinking about this kind of stuff, then you can end up thinking feature flags are really, really challenging, when actually it's the way that you're using the flags that are challenging, or the deficits in your platform. If your platform doesn't let you do things like this, you can still kind of work around it. So if you don't have an ability to track flag metadata, make a Google Sheet. This is like 80% of what you need. It's not hard to do. I asked ChatGPT to come up with some fake flag names and created this sheet in about 2 minutes, right? Like, it's not, you can start here today, and if you need to, and then kind of work towards baking this into your platform in the future. Likewise, if your feature flagging platform doesn't support kind of observability and analytics, if you're using OpenFeature, then you can get that without any work in your feature flagging platform. So OpenFeature has this concept called hooks that you can add code that will run every time a flag is evaluated. And you can configure a hook that will send telemetry data into your whatever your Open Telemetry backend is every time a flag is evaluated. And it's like literally like a line of code in some cases. So this is a really good example of why open standards are powerful. Any platform that conforms to the OpenFeature standard can now add observability into any platform that uses Open Telemetry. Open standards are awesome. OK, so now we know about how we can kind of find these flags. Now, how do we remove them? This is tough because managing technical debt is tough. Feature flags are a kind of technical debt, basically. But there are some tricks that you can use to kind of make some progress here. So one thing that some teams do is add time bombs. So you now have an expiration date for each flag. You can log an error if that flag is still being evaluated past its expiration date. There was a company earlier in the week that was saying that they send a Slack message to the team owning a flag whenever that flag is evaluated after the expiration date. Some more aggressive usage of this, you can set up your pre-production environments to throw an exception if you try and evaluate a flag that's already expired. You can do some kind of basic project management tricks. You can kind of create cleanup tickets, or you can allocate some time. You know, every sprint we're going to spend some time cleaning up flags. Every quarter we'll have like half a day to clean up flags, that kind of stuff. A trick that I really like is kind of aligning incentives by coming to a team agreement that we're only going to have like 10 featured flags in our code base at any one time. Pick your number, but let's say 10. Now, what this does is it aligns incentives, because when a product manager or a scrum master or a tech lead wants to put a new feature behind a feature flag, they now have to also put the time in to remove an old flag to make room for that new flag. So here we're aligning incentives where the person who gets to choose whether we clean the flags up or not is also the person that feels the benefit of cleaning up those flags. And there's some kind of like program management tricks where you can kind of define metrics around your feature flag, how well different teams are managing your feature flags, kind of set some OKRs and KPIs, all of that management gobbledygook. This does work, right? Like defining a goal and telling teams how they're progressing towards that goal is a useful thing to do. So if you're at a larger organization, this could help you. OK, so that was kind of the topic of kind of removing some of the stale flags that we have. Even better would be not adding those flags in the first place. So feature flags are not free. They have these costs that we just talked about, right? All of this feature flag debt. We use them because they provide benefits. They let us kind of get rid of long-lived feature branches. They let us release with more safety. They let us kind of perform experimentation. But the feature flag itself has no value. It's providing value, but in and of itself, it's not a valuable thing. I see some teams kind of getting drunk on feature flags at some point where they see that benefit and they start thinking that they should be adding a feature flag everywhere, and they don't see the costs of adding those feature flags. It's important to be kind of thoughtful about this and be consciously making that trade-off. What's the benefit that I'm looking for from a feature flag? And in this case, would a feature flag benefit, would the benefits that I'm getting from adding this feature flag outweigh the costs of managing it? So some kind of anti-patterns that I see some teams doing is things like kind of adding a flag for every story and kind of proudly declaring whenever we, like for every ticket we have a feature flag, or for every feature it's protected by a feature flag. That's not really the goal, right? The goal is not to collect feature flags. If you're not getting the benefit, or if the benefits don't outweigh the costs, then you shouldn't be doing it. And likewise, you kind of see teams sometimes kind of just running A/B tests for everything, but not actually making any decisions based on those experiments. If you're not going to use the experiment for anything valuable, don't pay the cost of the feature flag. Similarly, de-risking things that don't need to be de-risked. Some stuff, it's OK to just deploy the code and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, make another deploy. Some things are risky, some things aren't. Make a kind of conscious choice there. Then the final thing that I see some teams doing when they're really excited about feature flags is kind of putting them everywhere and putting those decision points everywhere. So I've got a little example to talk about this. Let's say we're maintaining this e-commerce store and we want to add this, this gift wrapping functionality to our store. Now this is absolutely the kind of thing that I would want to use a feature flag for. Right? I'd want to be able to, it's going to take me a while to build it, and I want to be able to test it, maybe in production before it's fully released. I'm pretty sure someone is going to ask me to A/B test this because I don't want to impact cart conversion. And if it doesn't work, impacts cart conversion or just breaks, I want to be able to turn it off. So the benefits of feature flagging are clearly there. I should do some feature flagging. So let's see how I could do that. So I've got my front-end code. I need to add the actual implementation. And then that's going to need to talk to some kind of API, and we're going to have to make some changes there. Probably we're going to have to make a bunch of other changes too. Our product catalog needs to know what stuff can be gift wrapped. Our cart service needs to keep track of what stuff is being gift wrapped. Our fulfillment service needs to be able to tell the people somewhere that they need to do the gift wrapping. So there's all these places in our system that we need to change in order to implement that feature, which means we need to add all these feature flag checks, right, to make it safe. Absolutely not. You don't need to put feature flags everywhere. What would happen if we just put a feature flag at the front of the system? We get the benefits of feature flagging, right? If the feature flag is turned off, no one sees this UI. This code isn't exercised. If the feature flag is turned on, all the code is exercised. I can deploy all of these back-end changes not protected by a feature flag and just have the front-end feature flag turned off, and it is protected. I can do my A/B testing. I can turn stuff off if stuff goes wrong. I get all of the benefits of feature flagging with a lot less feature flags. So this is the kind of like thoughtful work that you should be doing, because making this decision up front is way less work than cleaning up the feature flags at the back. And this pattern is called the keystone interface, because you're kind of like building all the parts, and then at the very end you slot in the keystone at the end and kind of turn it on. This is just one example. There's lots of different ways that you can be more thoughtful and intentional about your feature flags. Only add them where the benefits outweigh the costs. I'm a really big fan of feature flags. I'm telling you not to use so many feature flags. So let's go back to this, this kind of iceberg problem. So as I said, a lot of organizations struggle with this. Actually, who is kind of struggling with this themselves, where you've built your own platform and you're kind of having some regrets? Okay, so it happens, right? And at the point of time that you realize this is a problem, what you should be thinking about is, should we be outsourcing this problem? Should we be borrowing an open source framework? Should we be buying a commercial vendor? That migration can be challenging. OpenFeature can help with that migration. So we define this kind of common abstraction layer And what that means is if you build your internal platform against that abstraction layer, you now have the ability to swap out that feature flagging platform with another feature flagging platform. And you can do that in kind of like a safe, incremental way. So you can incrementally migrate. So some of your feature flagging decisions are being done by your homegrown system, but maybe like your A/B testing decisions are being done by some other third-party feature flagging platform. So you can even use a feature flag to manage this migration if you really want to get into feature flags. So this is an example of where OpenFeature can help. If you're building your own platform, there's also a bunch of other things that OpenFeature can do to help reduce just the kind of toil of building a feature flagging platform. We've kind of done it once for you so that everyone doesn't have to do it for you. OK, so some parting thoughts. When you hear someone saying, oh, it's just a DB table and 20 lines of code, pause for a moment and ask them what they think a feature flag is when they're saying that. And you can use that kind of iceberg metaphor to kind of talk through all of the hidden complexity that could happen if you start kind of thinking about rolling this thing yourself. Feature flags are super powerful, but they're also they're actually a lot more complex. That iceberg is bigger than a lot of people realize. If you don't take care to manage them well and invest in that platform, then they're going to end up sucking for you because you're going to have too many of them and you're going to have a hard time removing them. So kind of if you have some intentionality about how you manage your flags, then you're going to have a lot more fun with your feature flags. And they really are just a means to an end. I really do see these kind of feature flag enthusiasts that are super excited about adding feature flags everywhere. Think about the benefit you're getting from a feature flag. Think about whether you can get that benefit in another way or with less kind of feature flags smeared all over your code base. And then finally, consider using OpenFeature. Yeah, it can, particularly if you're on an internal platform, you can use OpenFeature now and maybe future-proof yourself a little bit for when you do decide that for some of your feature flagging, you want to move to an external platform. Thanks. And if you do go to the OpenFeature spec, please star it on GitHub. We are very close to 1,000 stars. Our goal is to get to 1,000 stars by the end of this KubeCon. There's probably enough people in this room that we can get there. Contribute back to the CNCF. Any questions? Yeah.
So if I have a feature framework in place already, how sophisticated does it need to be to integrate with OpenFeature?
If you have a feature flagging system already, how sophisticated does it have to be to integrate with OpenFeature? Good question. Like, not at all. I would actually say the first thing, even when you're making a feature flagging thing where everything is hard-coded and you don't even have any configuration or dynamic evaluation, you can still do that on top of OpenFeature. It's really simple to build a provider, like 20 lines of code, 100 lines of code or something, and you're putting that future-proofing in. So I would just say from the get-go, build on top of OpenFeature. It doesn't cost you that much, and it just gives you a bunch of optionality in the future. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Maybe an odd question, like you were talking about the keystone thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any resources you know of design patterns on feature flags on how to I'm in the middle. We just got done with a brand refresh on my site. There was a whole bunch of weird stuff with that.
Yeah.
Getting some guidance on that might be a nice thing.
Yeah. So the question is there kind of a place where you can find more of these feature flagging patterns like the keystone thing? Off the top of my head, I don't know of any. We actually had the OpenFeature Summit at the beginning of this week, and we had a really good talk from someone at Microsoft that was kind of laying out some of those patterns, the kind of code level patterns, and we were asking her to write us some blog posts or maybe put some guides on the website. It's something that we should kind of do more of. There's some books, there's some ebooks out there mostly from feature flagging vendors that actually have some pretty good content, but as of today, there isn't a kind of a repository of patterns that I'm aware of. Other questions? Yes.
those teams are often incentivized internally to like, basically have more A/B tests, right? Where the goal of running 100 A/B tests. Curious if you see all that, and which obviously can cause global.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you see that on the other side of the DevOps and PH1.
So I think, so your question is, for on the A/B testing side, some teams are kind of encouraged to kind of, they're measured on like how many tests they're producing. And do I see similar stuff in kind of the more in the DevOps world? I don't think that's as common. I think there's the odd kind of like engineering manager that's kind of drunk the feature flag Kool-Aid and is like keeps on whittering on at all his teams like, oh, is that behind a feature flag? I think that does happen sometimes. I think it's less common than A/B testing. Yeah. Yes. Sorry? Thank you. I mean, so I'm not sure if I can summarize that, but I mean, one of the points you're making is if you have a stale flag that has a bad default, but it's configured to be not that default, then you can get into real trouble if your feature flagging platform goes down or your service can't talk to your feature flagging platform. I mean, I don't have a silver bullet answer to it. I think it is fundamentally a form of tech debt that you need to invest in. Like most things in software, at the end of the day, it ends up being a people problem. I think it's about getting people to understand the cost and the risk and invest, and that in order to make that investment to kind of keep the tech debt in check. But yeah, in general, in my consulting life, I've generally found that the best solution is to kind of go up the chain and eventually persuade someone high enough up the org that they can set those KPRs or OKRs, that kind of stuff, and measure. Yeah.
The OpenFeature CLI makes the default centrally configurable now.
Okay, if you're using...
You can come to Mike's talk later.
Yeah, yeah, so there's another talk later on today about the OpenFeature CLI, which maybe makes that management a little bit easier and more type safe too, but helps with the management of the defaults. Other questions? Oh, yes. Yeah.
I think one thing that we're dealing with right now, especially in a lot of people, is the idea of how you approach continuous integration and testing when there are so many different permutations and feature flags that have been fully rolled out to the scale. How do you approach this in CI? How do you know that you have confidence in your tests when there's so many different technologies?
Yeah, so how do you manage testing when you've got a large number of flags? It's at least one other conference talk, maybe several conference talks. I think I did a conference talk around that once actually. It's a really big topic. Come talk to me afterwards and we can talk about it more. I mean, I think mainly a lot of it is around kind of managing flags. I think a lot of it is also around keeping track of which flags interact with which parts of the system and putting some infrastructure around being able to override flags during testing so that you can kind of test the different paths. And a lot of it comes down to kind of having some intentionality and some kind of patterns in your head of how to do that testing. But yeah, it's a really big topic. Yeah. One last question. Yes. Yeah, like has there been any kind of discussion to kind of define like a taxonomy of feature flags? Like, so I wrote a blog post a long time ago, not that long ago. I wrote a blog post about feature flagging a long time ago. If you Google feature flagging Pete Hodgson, it's probably like the first blog post on Martin Fowler's blog. And in that, I kind of have a basic categorization of kind of like release management, experimentation, operational toggles, so kind of like kill switches, and then kind of permissions or entitlements. Those are the main categories that I think you need to think about, because you can, if you know what bucket you're in, which of those big buckets you're in, then you can make a lot of decisions around how long will this flag be around, for example, and like how do I implement this flag. Yeah. Yep. Okay, thanks everyone. And I'll be here or right outside for a while. I really do love talking about feature flags, so come find me if you want to talk to me. Thanks.